Fundamentally attacks on the international rules-based order. You're seeing country after country speak out in unison and often in a coordinated fashion. We've spoken out in conjunction and coordination with the European Union, United Kingdom, Canada, many allies and partners in Asia, and the power of countries speaking out together I think will be increasingly evident. So, we've seen some responses from, for example, the government in Beijing to I suspect that is only going to redouble the concerns and the focus that other countries give to the actions that the government in Beijing has taken in abuse of human rights. I think we're already seeing that.
Secretary, it's time for a final question. Sam.
Thank you. You mentioned the different tools that you have at your disposal to address these issues. Obviously, the issue and the situation in Burma or Myanmar has happened since this report was written, but it offers a live case where human rights are being suppressed day by day on the ground. And we've seen from the US a kind of escalation of sanctions, week by week, more sanctions, but the generals in the country are pushing on with their course. They're not changing course. The death toll is getting more and more. What more do you have at your disposal to try to actually, get them to listen when it seems like they are completely unresponsive to everything you've done so far?
So, I'd say a few things about that. First, the actions that we've seen by the Burmese military in terms terms of its attacks on civilians are reprehensible. And we witnessed just this past weekend, as I noted earlier, an attack that killed about 100 civilians. Some people simply caught in the crossfire, others just expressing peacefully their views. And this follows a series of other attacks, and indeed increasingly disturbing and even horrifying violence. One thing is clear: it's that the people of Burma are speaking clearly. They don't want to live under military rule, and that is evident from what we're seeing and hearing and witnessing every single day in Burma. So we've taken a number of actions, as you note. Of course, we and others have spoken out very forcefully against the violence being perpetrated by the military regime. Beyond that, we've taken specific action with regard to those responsible for the coup and enterprises that support them, including designations under various sanctions laws. We've also worked closely with other countries to speak out in unison. There are, I think, other things that countries should be looking at. For example, some countries and some companies in various parts of the world have significant investments in enterprises that support the Burmese military. They should be looking at those investments and reconsidering them as a means of denying the military the financial support it needs to sustain itself against the will of the people. But I think you can expect us to continue to speak out strongly and to work with close allies and partners, including the ASEAN countries, in strong opposition to the actions that the coup regime is taking in Burma.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. We submitted to the U.S. Congress earlier today the country reports on human rights practices for the 45th year. I think that number demonstrates, as well as anything, the depth of the U.S. interest in and dedication to the promotion of human rights. And as the Secretary said, it is as strong a dedication as ever. Our aim is always to identify human rights challenges and use our voice and our position on the world stage to draw attention to abuses of human rights, no matter where or when they occur. And to make progress in advancing these human rights, you need facts. That's why each year the U.S. government issues the country reports on human rights practices, which address, as required by U.S. law, the status of internationally recognized human rights in all countries that are members of the United Nations. These reports provide an objective record of whether human rights and freedoms are being protected, both by law and in practice, around the world. The reports are prepared by U.S. diplomatic missions that collect, analyze, and synthesize information from a variety of sources. The country reports do not reach legal conclusions, rank countries, or draw comparisons across them. They do not attempt to catalog every human rights incident, nor are these reports an effort by the U.S. government to judge others. Instead, they are factual in nature. Publicizing facts and verifiable information can encourage governments to change course and seek to end human rights abuses. At the conclusion of this press briefing, the 2020 Country Reports on Human Rights Practices will be available to the public on the State Department website at www.state.gov. Thank you for being here today, and I am happy to take your questions.
Please.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up a little bit on China and the situation in Xinjiang. There's a determination that this is a genocide ongoing. When you say genocide, it's supposed to trigger whatever it takes from a power like the US to stop it, to abide to the never again pledge. but the sanctions imposed so far seems a little bit low-key with regard to these targets. Do you feel that the US is currently doing whatever it takes to stop a genocide in Xinjiang, and what needs to be done to do that? Thank you.
Thanks very much. So the US has already deployed a number of tools in response to the genocide determination. We have been clear that crimes against humanity and genocide have taken place and are continuing to be inflicted on Uyghurs, crimes against humanity against other ethnic and religious minorities in Xinjiang. Obviously, we can't ignore this, and we must meet such actions with serious consequences. We have deployed sanctions, and we have taken sanction actions in unity with the United Kingdom and Canada, which announced similar tranches of sanctions under their respective authorities. Also in parallel with the European Union, which undertook a broader global human rights action. This united response sends a strong signal to those who violate and abuse human rights that such actions will not be tolerated. Even prior to the determination that genocide had taken place, we had been communicating with businesses working in China, or businesses contemplating working in China. We issued a business advisory back in July of 2020. We did this in conjunction with the Department of the Treasury, the Department of Commerce, and Department of Homeland Security, cautioning businesses about the economic, legal, and reputational risks of supply chain links to entities that engage in human rights abuses, including forced labor in Xinjiang and elsewhere in China. Later on, in September of 2020, the State Department published human rights due diligence guidance for transactions with foreign governments involving products or services with surveillance capabilities. It provides practical and accessible human rights guidance to U.S. businesses seeking to prevent their products or services with surveillance capabilities from being misused.
Thank you.
Yes, the former administration, next the designation of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, the Golan Heights as occupied territory. This year's report seems to continue the tradition. Does that mean that you are fine with this non-designation designation? How do you designate the West Bank? Thank you.
So, as we stated in previous year, we retitled this human rights report to refer to the commonly used geographic names of the area the report covers, which are Israel, West Bank, and Gaza. That's in line with our practices generally. We also believe it is clearer and more useful for readers seeking information on human rights in those specific areas. The title of the report was updated to reflect current practices in the department and to be clearer and more useful to readers and researchers.
What is the West Bank? I mean, is it not occupied? Is it occupied? Are you fine with this new reality?
So, language in this report is not meant to convey a position on any final status issues to be negotiated between the parties to the conflict, including the specific boundaries of Israeli sovereignty in Jerusalem or the borders between Israel and any future Palestinian state.
Thank you. My name is Mohammed Al Ahmed with Al Jazeera Arabic. The United States government was among 31 signatories of the joint statement of the Human Rights Council, which called on Egypt to lift its curb on the freedoms of expression and assembly. How are you planning, based on that joint statement and on today's report, how are you planning to build on that to pressure Egypt to improve its human rights record? Thank you.
President Biden has made clear that human rights will be at the center of our foreign policy, and that includes with Egypt. That was part of the driver for the United States joining on to the joint statement at the Human Rights Council, calling upon Egypt to improve its human rights record and emphasizing the fundamental importance of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, and the need to respect a robust civil society. We continue to raise human rights concerns with officials in the government of Egypt. We also continue to support civil society to the extent possible. As the Secretary told Foreign Minister Shukri, human rights will be at the center of our relations with Egypt, and we look forward to strengthening our historic partnership and ensuring respect for democracy and human rights.
Yes, Kahn.
Thanks for doing this. I wanted to ask a quick question about the Secretary's remarks with regard to the reproductive health section. And he said that there will be reports on that later in the year because they weren't included in the report. But I'm just curious, does the State Department have a determination as to what the impact was of not having these sections in the report over the last few years on reproductive health globally?
That's an excellent question, and I'm not sure that we have an immediate answer for that. I think that is something worth looking into. I think you will see a fair bit of research and study going into the impact on sexual and reproductive health rights in the context of COVID-19. I think we as a bureau, if we find the means to do so, may need to take a look at that question of, was there an impact by not having this reflected in the human rights reports?
with Al Television. In putting the human rights in the center of the foreign policy, what will change in your dealing in the country, with other countries, especially with the Middle East countries?
There will be a shift, I think, in focus. We have long raised human rights issues, but this administration has been more forward-leaning, and I think that changes the degree and the centrality to which we consider this issue as we are considering the whole universe of our.
This is where people can come.
Take a couple final questions. Yes.
I have two questions, one on North Korea and one on South Korea. As this administration is dealing with North Korea's nuclear issue, I'd like to know whether this North Korean human rights situation is going to be handled separately or as part of entire North Korean issues. Some human rights experts say that North Korea's human rights issue sometimes sacrificed or being used as tools for negotiation with North Korea. So how are you going to address this North Korean human rights issue? My second question on South Korea. South Korea last year passed a law banning leaflet sending activities into North Korea. So mostly done by North Korean defectors living in South Korea. And this law went into effect today. So what's your view on this? Any concerns? And do you support these defectors' effort providing like outside information into North Korea?
So on your first question, we do remain deeply concerned by North Korea's egregious human rights record, which remains among the worst in the world. The State Department, together with the interagency, is currently undergoing a North Korea policy review process, and human rights will remain an indispensable component of our overall policy towards the North Korean government. We will continue to hold the North Korean government accountable for its egregious human rights violations. In terms of the anti-leaflet bill, increasing the free flow of information into North Korea is a U.S. priority. The dissemination of information is critical for North Koreans to access fact-based information not controlled by the North Korean regime. As a global policy, we advocate for the protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms. And with regard to the DPRK, we continue to campaign for the free flow of information into the DPRK. We continue to work with our partners in the NGO community and in other countries to promote North Koreans' access to information.
wanted to go back to the question of China. Chinese officials have stated explicitly in recent days that the U.S. conception of human rights is not normative, and they contend that their own human rights policies are anchored in UN law. So it seems that the two of these permanent members of the Security Council disagree about the bedrock principles or basic law, if you will, of the multilateral system. So I wonder, what are the ramifications of this dispute for multilateral approaches to human rights issues? And then bearing in mind the sanctions.
Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. I am Nomiki Konst. Bessemer, Alabama should be top of the mind today for every progressive and working person in America. The National Labor Relations Board has begun counting the votes to see whether workers at Amazon's giant fulfillment center in Bessemer have decided to unionize. Amazon has fought tooth and nail to intimidate its workers out of supporting the union. They have spied and they have lied. And when all of that wasn't enough, they got the city of Bessemer to shorten the timing of the traffic lights outside the warehouse so organizers would not have time to appeal to workers while they waited for the red light to change. They've intimidated. They've sent relentless texts and set up non-labor compliant voting facilities. Have you no shame, Jeff Bezos? Richest man in America? Nobody really expected a fair fight. Neither the history of corporate America nor the grubby greed of Amazon would lead you to hope for that. But wow, just a shred of decency might have been nice, since all eyes are on you. So the fact that we have come this far is a testament to the courage of the workers and the grit of the organizers from the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, RWDSU. Win or lose, they have already accomplished a lot. And as we wait for the votes to be counted, now is a beautiful time to thank them. So thank them. Go online, share, thank these workers. Because they have torn down the curtain behind which Amazon was hiding. It's the same curtain behind which you can find the racist, misogynistic algorithms of Google or the cynical and selfish data hoarding of Facebook. And of course, the rank exploitation of workers by Uber and the other gig employment apps. The workers of Bessemer have torn down the idea that these tech giants are somehow different from the exploiters of the 20th century, because maybe some of them donate to Democrats or even identify with Democrats or say they're woke. Maybe Jeff Bezos believes that, but the workers of Bessemer have shown that's a crock. 100 years ago, Jeff Bezos would have been one of the copper bosses who shot Joe Hill. You know the town of Bessemer? It has a long history and noble tradition of fighting for labor rights and civil rights. Before the annihilation of labor in the South, there were once union mines and union mills in Bessemer. And right now, actually, there are still union poultry plants up the road from Amazon. And of course, Bessemer was much on the mind of Martin Luther King when he said that the best road out of poverty is the union. This fight is bigger than one Amazon warehouse. It is way bigger. The fight is about restoring respect to working people and taking power back into our hands. It is symbolic. It is about recognizing that the way to win respect is to demand it, not ask for it. You know, Amazon really revealed its truth when they told workers they should vote down the union because the company would give them better wages and benefits without the union, because that's always happened. That kind of paternalism has been the enemy going way back more than 100 years. This isn't just about wages and benefits. And the company's failure even to say so seemed to prove the point that they don't get it at all. Or maybe they really do. This whole fight was brought on by the way Amazon treated its employees during a pandemic, during an economic crisis, their frontline workers. The way it exposed them to COVID and worked them and monitored them relentlessly, created inhumane working conditions, and fired them for speaking up. It is no coincidence today that in Germany, Amazon workers went on strike. And last week, Amazon workers struck in Italy. Amazon workers are already unionized in both of those countries, and they are striking. I want you to hear part of the statement from the president of the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, RWDSU, Stuart Applebaum of New York. Quote, "It's not just workers in Alabama, it's workers everywhere who are saying to Jeff Bezos that enough is enough. No matter what language they speak, Amazon workers around the globe will not stand for the working conditions they've been forced to endure for too long. Last week, it was Italian workers. This week, it's German workers. And the union vote count gets underway for Alabama workers. What unites them all are the unacceptable working conditions at Amazon facilities everywhere." So let's be clear. These abysmal working conditions are not some unfortunate after effect. They are the way Amazon does business globally. And that is why the working class fight is a global fight. We are all interconnected because they are all interconnected. Amazon should pay better, and God knows its billions in pandemic profit would allow them to do so. But this isn't just about money and pay. It is about power, plain and simple. If the company has the power to give you good wages, then it has the power to take them away. And even more to this point, this company demands blood for those wages. Treating its employees the way it treats the robots who work at their sides, as cogs in the machine, in a giant machine. It's ugly and it's dehumanizing. It is inhumane. Amazon proved during the pandemic that it isn't going to do the right thing unless it is forced to do the right thing, and maybe not even so. And that is why this union is important. That is what the union is for. And that is why this fight is seismic. It's symbolic, win or lose. It'll inspire so many others to organize, because after the Bessemer workers win this vote and force Amazon to do the right thing, what comes after that is to rebuild a labor movement that can force America to do the right thing. We have an amazing show today. Very excited to have the one and only former Amazon worker, Chris Smalls. He's going to be talking about his fight over the last year since he got fired from Amazon in Staten Island for speaking up. And then later we have Joshua Kahn Russell and Napoleon to talk about the news of the day. Stick around. We'll be right back. Very excited. All right. Guys, welcome back. So you may know about our book club. It is the Nomiki Show book club. We are actually we're only a couple days out of the month of March, where we have been covering 4 books. Capital is Dead. That interview is up. That was our main book of the month for the book club, is by Mackenzie Wark. It's fascinating, actually very you can't see it, it's mirrored, but very relevant to this big tech conversation because of the way that tech has shifted capitalism or has created something kind of like beyond capitalism, I guess is the best way of describing it, because capitalism does exist and there's also this alternative version. That interview is up, and we are about to post the interview with Catherine Franke, who wrote Repair, Redeeming the Promise of Abolition, a fascinating book about abolition. It was, I think, International Abolition Day last week. Really interesting read, fascinating about how some towns and some regions of the country, Mississippi, part of South Carolina, took matters into their own hands and actually created a pretty strong abolition community. But, of course, capital came in and wiped that out. Go check out our book club. It is at patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. There are 3 different levels, 1 book a month, 2 books a month, and 4 books a month. The other books we have on the list this month are The Corona Crash by Grace Blakely, Rentier Capitalism by Brett Christophers, and Hostile Environment by Maya Goodfellow. Those are the books for March. All right. Chris Smalls, the one, the only Chris Smalls. Of course, Chris is an organizer, a very well-known organizer. He's a former Amazon employee. He's the founder of the Congress of Essential Workers, and he has a new podcast, a new show, very exciting. Hang on a second, let me get the actual. It's at youtube.com, ISS Issa Smalls World. You got it right there. It's a newish podcast. And it's very cool. You just interviewed Sarah Nelson, our favorite, the beautiful, wonderful, brilliant Sarah Nelson, who is the president of the Flight Attendants Workers Union, part of CWA. Chris, thanks for joining on this very historic day.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry. Yeah, I just left my rally, so I'm still post-rally right now.
That's good. We like that energy. Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
Post-rally energy is like a special energy. So.
Oh yeah. Definitely,
fantastic.
Definitely. I'm excited.
So I want to just recap about, it's been a year now, right? Since the pandemic hit, since you spoke up as a worker at Amazon in Staten Island. Can you just remind folks what happened to you? I know you've told the story a million times, but I think in this moment, as folks are in Bessemer, the votes being counted, it's important to recognize the material conditions of what was happening on the ground as the world was panicking, afraid to touch things, afraid to there were so many fears we didn't even understand the pandemic. And how did Amazon treat you guys?
Right. Yeah. This just reminds me, even like you mentioned, being 1 year to the day when I was fired, it just took me back to that place, that moment when we were out there raising health and safety concerns initially. And I think the union drive actually started around the same time, because that building down there in Bessemer actually launched in March. So it all ties together. It all interconnects. And I'm just happy that I'm out here even a year later, still advocating and speaking up for these workers out here for Amazon. And on the brink of probably the most historical drive since the 1930s. Either way this vote goes, it's going to galvanize us workers. And I want to definitely uplift the spirits today on the day where the vote is actually closed up. So it was great to be out here in New York and at my former facility. So I'm happy to do this.
So what was happening on the ground when you were working? I mean, what kind of conditions, what was Amazon doing that pushed you to speak up and others to speak up as well?
So when the virus hit last year, New York City was the epicenter. People were dying every 15 minutes. And what I saw at work was my coworkers getting sick in a domino effect. Flu-like symptoms, dizziness, fatigue. Every day was something different. Or people weren't showing up at all, which was even more alarming, because we're talking about my supervisors, the people, my colleagues that I work hand in hand with. They were showing up sick or not showing up at all. And it was a very eerie feeling. Something was wrong and we were unprotected. We had no PPE, no facial masks, no cleaning supplies. And we're being told we're an essential worker, but we're not being treated as such. And that's what forced me to take further action. And I tried to go through the proper channels at first, but after a whole week of doing that, sitting in the break room for 10 hours a day with fellow workers of mine, several of us, we got nowhere. We got no response. And they decided to quarantine me and put a target on me to try to stop me from organizing. So that walkout, exactly to the day, March 30th last year, 2 hours after that walkout, that's when I was terminated.
2 hours after the walkout. And how many people walked out when, and, you know, just to actually remember, guys, everyone was ordering their PPE on Amazon. Like Amazon was the distributor. I mean, they had, if anybody could get access to PPE, it's Amazon. It's just as a side note. How many people walked out that day?
That day was a good 50 to 60 associates. You know, the Amazon spokespeople, they always downplay it, but there's plenty of photos and videos that everybody can refer to. You know, we planned it strategically down to the T, down to the timing. And we had about 50 to 60 people walk out with us and tell their stories. They went right over to the media that was there on the ground and told their stories. And that's how everything started from there.
Did you have union support at that time? Had you been in touch with union organizers? Is this just independent?
No, that's the most amazing thing about it. We didn't have any support. It was just workers driven. And this year, when we returned today, we had some unions that showed up and represented the workers and stood in solidarity with the workers. So it was great to see that.
So after you were terminated, I think it was a few weeks or months after, there were things that were leaked about how the Amazon seniority all the way at the top was illustrating who you are. So can you and maybe we could put that article up on screen, but can you talk about what happened with the senior leadership, like global company had to say about you?
Yeah, we're talking about all the way up to the highest peak, you know, Jeff Bezos himself. This was actually about a week after I was fired. Jeff Bezos himself with his top general counsel, David Sapolsky, which is, I believe, the general counsel for the company. They decided to run a smear campaign on me, calling me not smart or articulate, you know, ironically, to make me the face of the whole unionizing efforts against Amazon. And, you know, they rather answer questions about diminishing my character than to answer questions about their own health and safety concerns of their own warehouse workers, which is a shame.
And did you have any response? Is there any sort of you've been terminated, number one. I imagine there's some sort of legal response you could make there, but then to be smeared like that in a very public way, is there anything legally you can do?
So yes, on behalf of, you know, Letitia James from the New York Attorney General's office, they've been investigating on my behalf and several other workers as well. But I've also filed my own civil suit, which is a class action lawsuit for discrimination and also for the people that were affected. And, you know, besides that, you know, my activism spoke for itself. You know, I wouldn't have found this organization had any of that didn't happen. So I've been happy to travel the country with this amazing organization. And we protest in front of every Jeff Bezos mansion to let them know that, you know, we are very smart and articulate. And you're never going to stop and smear any of us anymore because we're not going to allow that to happen. We're going to hold you accountable.
Oh, man, it's like absolutely effing ridiculous that they got away with that. Okay, so what have you learned about organizing over the last year? I always find it magical when workers get angry, upset, and of course, unions have been under attack for the last 30 years, so they're weaker than they've ever been, and the conditions are worsening as a result. And when they self-organize, and just the arc of what you can learn about organizing over a year must be magnificent. So, would you mind sharing some of the lessons?
Man, yeah, I had to be a fast learner. I'll tell you that. I lost a lot of sleep, and you know, organizing it's a 24/7 job. You know, you organize 24/7. You know, I talk to people from all over the world now. Zoom obviously made the world a lot smaller, And the type of organizing we're doing in the 21st century, you got to adapt. You got to fight power with power. So what I've learned, I just learned that the power of people, it overcomes everything. For me to be sitting here a year later, I was unemployed. I'm still unemployed, but I still was able to do what I had to do when it comes to activism and organizing, because the community uplifts and the community supports that. So without the community, you have nothing. And I learned that very quickly, that you can't rely on these 1% class. You can't rely on these billionaires. You can't even rely on our politicians, our elected officials. They all failed us, and they all continue to fail us. So what we have at the end of the day is ourselves, and the revolution starts with ourselves. So that's what I learned.
Let's talk about what's happening in Bessemer today. How are you feeling? What do you think is how do you think it's going to go down?
To be honest with you, I mean, we already won. Whether they win or lose, we won because we reached a plateau that was never reached. We already, to even get to a union vote and be talked about as much as it has, it reached the president's desk, our chief and commander. Who could have ever imagined? We're talking about a company that's been anti-union for 27 years. So we already won. Whether they get the vote or not passed, we already galvanized the rest of the country, if not the entire world. The world is watching this vote. And we're going to continue. We're going to continue the efforts, whether we win or lose. I think other buildings will try, and some buildings will succeed. Maybe all of them will succeed. And that's what we hope for. Do you know who's starting to organize right now? You have any sort of projection, or is that top secret? New York, Staten Island, we starting to organize. And we will be going public soon. I know I have plenty of workers in there that's ready to organize. So once we find out which union we're going to, represent the workers, or whether we're going to go the independent route, we can't wait to announce that. But I can tell you now, it's going to happen right here in New York. I mean, this is what I find so interesting. And I think a lot of people are curious about this too. Like, why some union, like, what is it that draws workers to some union or another? Like, why was it RWDSU, which is based in New York, Stuart Applebaum, the president's in New York? Why, like, do some of these unions align with certain places? And like, what is that connection? Well, the beauty of it is that with Amazon, each facility has its choice to choose any union. So whatever union is in that area that's doing great work, they want to go with that one. And that's what happened in Alabama. The RWDSU, they are already unionized at a lot of the poultry factories down there. So the surrounding areas are already a part of this union. And the union looked at Amazon as a perfect opportunity. The workers actually went to that union. It was the opposite way, actually. The workers went to that union saying, hey, we already know about you, your history, especially here in Alabama with the other factories. We know the treatment. They're being paid well. They're being protected. They absolutely fought for some of the workers' jobs, because some of the organizers actually were employees of poultry factories that had to go through their own arbitrations, and that union represented them. So the beauty about it is you're able to choose what union in your area represents you the best. And up here in New York, we have several different unions to choose from. So that's just the thing that we have to do. We have to find out what union is going to represent the workers' demands and the worker rights in that area, specific area, the best. And that's what's the one you want to go with. Do they prepare you for the intimidation tactics, the union busting tactics? Do they sort of like educate workers before? I mean, forget about a vote, just the process of organizing to get to a vote. The intimidation factor is with Amazon from day one. And it may not be directly, but I could tell you with their training classes, even their safety classes, they try to implement little union busting things, see something, say something. Like what? When you say see something, say something, like what do they want you to? They want your workers to be divided. They want the workers to start telling on each other, getting other workers in trouble. And my thing is, why would I want to get somebody in trouble that's on the same level as me? This job is everything. We're working paycheck to paycheck. So even as a supervisor, I never implemented any of these, scare tactics. I never tracked people, even though I did track people. I had to do that as a job. I never reported anybody coming back from late from break. I never was on top of them because I came from that position, number one. And number two, this is our livelihood. These people survive over this job. Who am I to take that away from them? And I understand what they're going through physically and mentally. Management don't. Management, they're getting paid salary, they're getting paid all the stocks, they get all the incentives. We don't get any of these things as entry-level workers and hourly workers. So I would never side with management. And that's why it was easy for me to take my stance and easy for me to fight back the way I am, because I never was a part of that culture.
What are some of the worst things you're hearing from Bessemer right now in terms of intimidation tactics? I mean, we've heard some of the stuff like they're being monitored and like the traffic lights changing, but have you heard some of the other details?
Yeah, when I was down there, I spoke to some workers. Besides, they handing out little pins, that say "Vote No." So I shared a couple of photos of that as well. They handing out stickers, banners, and stuff. They put these workers. They had put them in classrooms, 4 classes a day, and one shift. Your shift, whether it's 8 to 10 hours, they put you in 4 classes, broke you down into groups of 20, and sometimes even smaller groups of that, and just drilled nothing but non-facts about union.
Wait, so this is
head.
instead of working,
So
like
they
you
just
show up,
continue to brainwash.
you show up to work and
Yeah.
you're supposed to do your job, and instead of doing your job, they're like, oh, guess what? Job's canceled today. You're going to sit through like 4 propaganda classes.
Yep, absolutely. And I was told that from several workers, and it's true. It's very much true.
Even that's a violation, like I assume a violation of labor law. Like you're hired, contract or not, you're hired to do something specific, and now you're doing another job, which is propaganda. I'm not a labor attorney,
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm sure they have
Yeah.
loopholes there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And how do
Or
workers or money exactly. Are workers feeling exhausted? Are they just like, I'm done with this, it's not working? Like, did you meet any workers who were like, I'm not voting for the union? Is it working at all? Any of their tactics?
I've met workers that said, I don't care. I don't care about it.
How do you not care?
I met workers that said, they don't care about it. They just don't. They're disconnected. It's a lot of misinformation. And yes, they are exhausted mentally as well. They're being torn. You go to work and like I said, you're being put in 4 classes, and then as soon as you leave out of work, you're seeing nothing but banners that say pro-union and organizers on the corner. Imagine what you're going through day to day. It's definitely pulling teeth. And I couldn't imagine it working there right now, especially with all the scrutiny and all the eyes that's on that building. It's a lot of pressure. As just a normal worker, it's a lot of pressure. So my hat's off to them for even, sticking all the way through and voting.
Have people quit? Have you gotten a sense that like folks are quitting just because they're sick of this?
Well, I would hope not, because Amazon did offer $2,000 for people to quit and be rehired after the union vote. So that's another tactic that they're using against these workers. They're paying them $2,000 to resign and then be rehired after the union vote, but don't participate in the union vote, basically.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I know.
And meanwhile, like, I have no idea what the pay would be during the period of the vote, or how long that would be, or I have no sense. But interesting. In overall, like in terms of the energy on the ground, like percentage wise, what do you feel the workers are like? This percentage feels inspired. This percentage is exhausted, but just like does maybe support the union. This percentage doesn't care. Apathetic, and then pro Amazon.
To be honest with you, my opinion, it was probably 50-50. And I know 50-50 sounds bad in a sense, because it is a 50-50 with Amazon. Yeah. But you have to face the reality of the situation as well. I always look at the pros and the cons. And the cons is that, once again, There's a lot of misinformation being thrown out towards these workers every single day. It's 24/7. That building never closed. That's 24/7 propaganda. And then on top of that, just think about it. These workers don't come home and turn on CNN and turn on the news and turn on the Nomiki show. They don't go on Twitter like we do and post and share. They don't do that. These workers come home and go to sleep because they got to get up and go to work again. Even all the politicians that went down there and prominent people that went down there, that means nothing if it don't reach the workers. And that's the opportunities that we have to think about as well. How do you reach workers that have to work 10, 11, 12 hours a day and then come home to their families and then go to bed and rinse and repeat and do that again? So I hope that me traveling down there with other workers and telling our story, that helped resonate a little bit. Workers connecting with workers.
Workers connecting with workers. I love that. No, you're right. I mean, I think we in the group that's, constantly engaged in media and movement stuff, sometimes underestimate like our reach or overestimate our reach, including politicians. And sometimes politicians do it because they want to build a brand or they want to raise money or they have the right intention. They want to be there in solidarity, but it doesn't always necessarily translate to moving people. When does the vote end? Like, when do the votes get tallied? Do we have a sense of when we'll find out?
I believe they're being tallied right now, unless there's any discrepancies on either side, which I'm pretty sure there is. It's possibly to be delayed. I'm hoping that we'll hear some type of preliminary voting result within the next couple of days. If not, we might have to wait until about Easter. Maybe we'll have some good news for Easter.
And is it just like anything over 50%? Like how does the vote break down? What does it have to be?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe, majority rules. And, whether it's 1 over 50, whatever side is on is who wins.
It's amazing. Chris, okay, before we wrap up, tell us about your podcast. Tell us about your show.
Sure. It's a Smalls World. Tune in. It's on YouTube. It's free. We also have a Patreon set up for those who can contribute, help us get our foot on the ground, our grassroots in the podcast world. Just launched a few months ago, and we had the pleasure to have Sarah Nelson on as our last guest. And we had a lot of prominent people on. Harvey K is another one.
Look at that guy.
We have actual Amazon workers on there all the time. Oh, yeah. And Nomiki, I got to get you on there too. So clear your schedule up. I'm going to definitely reach out to you.
Anytime.
We'll get you on there. But yeah, please follow the show. It's a great show. And I love to be a part of it every weekend.
Look at that one. I love this one. Chris on how to negotiate. This is the stuff I love. Oh, Blakely. Oh, we love Blakely. Blakely from New York. Oh, great guests. Brilliant guests. Fantastic. Chris Smalls, thanks for your work.
Actually my co-host.
Wait, Blakely's your co-host? Get out. Blakely is a great New York activist. Very great New York activist.
Yeah.
Love it. I'm glad that you guys have teamed up.
Absolutely.
Chris, always so great to talk to you. Thank you for fighting for so many workers across the country, not just Amazon workers, but like what you did was courageous and has inspired other people. And you know that Bessemer, win or lose, is inspiring others to do this. And it's really about transforming. I don't have to tell you this. I'm just saying it because it has to be said. It's about transforming the labor movement from the ground up and rebuilding the labor movement and strengthening it and, integrating it back into the infrastructure of American politics, not something that's beholden to the American political system. So thank you for what you do, for the courage, for fighting and for inspiring so many other people to organize. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. Good luck today. And, we'll see. Hopefully we get a good result in the next couple of days.
Absolutely.
All right. All right, everybody. We'll be right back with our amazing panel of Joshua Kahn Russell and Napoleon the Legend talking about today's news. BRB. thinking like, I'm gonna Medici this shit. Napoleon, what's it gonna take for us to get a song done by you?
I got you. You just gotta let me know what you need.
I don't know. Anything, whatever you're feeling. I'm going.
Okay.
You're the expert.
I'm
down. I'm gonna
All right,
Medici this shit. Like I'm some sort of.
I'm gonna think about it in the next few weeks. Okay.
Yay! A little reset. Maybe we'll do like a little rebranding. All right. You're gonna inspire me. It'll be like a whole makeover.
Cool.
The Nomi. I dyed my hair. Like we're just gonna do a whole. I love it. All right, Napoleon to Legend, of course, regular of the Nomiki Show, hip hop artist, activist, brilliant speaker of all things. And Joshua Kahn Russell wearing his TMBS shirt, giving the Michael Brooks show some love. I have one of those shirts. I've got to wear it one day, actually. Great to see you, Joshua.
Mine too.
Yeah, we should coordinate. Just a special day. Yes. Joshua Kahn Russell is executive director of the Wildfire Project. Hello, Joshua. Long time no see.
Good to see you again.
If you follow us on Instagram, Joshua and I chilled in the Redwoods this weekend. It was really fun. We are no longer in the same city, but I recognize those plants behind you, Joshua.
Restorative.
You are you understand horticulture an intuitive level like I've never seen before. So I don't know if I'm allowed to tell that secret, but
all good. Yeah. I mean, what I would say, they're just relationships, you just got to take care of your relationships, whether they're with plants or people.
Just that easy, guys. It's really easy to just deal with people and plants. All right. So today, or yesterday, excuse me, was the first day of the murder trial of Derek Chauvin, the person who is on trial. Let's just remind everybody, he is on trial for murdering George Floyd. Let's play this video real quick.
You're also going to learn that the officers take an oath when they become police officers. They take an oath that I will enforce the law courteously and appropriately, and as you will learn, as applies to this case, never employing unnecessary force or violence, because you will learn that on May 25th of 2020, Mr. Derek Chauvin betrayed this badge when he used excessive and unreasonable force upon the body of Mr. George Floyd.
And you will learn that Derek Chauvin did exactly what he had been trained to do over the course of his 19-year career. The use of force is not attractive, but it is a necessary component of policing.
The force.
All right, so those were parts of the opening remarks for defense and prosecution of the officer who murdered, George Floyd. I kind of want to talk about how the media has been portraying this. Not that we need to say this to folks, but largest uprising in American history, happening during a pandemic, folks showing up across the world in solidarity with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and really the whole movement for Black lives in response to police brutality against people of color, Indigenous people. This is something, it was a massive education for many people in this country who did not understand the complexities of racism within police and white supremacy. Let's just be very clear. So with all that being said, for the most part, the media has made this about George Floyd and not about the officer who held him down for almost 10 minutes. Napoleon, I mean, we it shouldn't surprise us, but this is it's grotesque, I assume, but why do you think it's so hard after all of that for folks to shift their language just the slightest bit? Why do you think that police are still deified, even in the media?
I mean, I guess it's just it's white supremacy. It's the propaganda. It's very entrenched and it's obviously very, very strong. And I mean, I'm somebody. I've gotten guns pulled on me by police officers several times. In different cities, whether it was in Washington D.C., in Brooklyn, and things like that. So it's something that happens to a lot of my friends or worse. You know what I'm saying? So it's it's being exposed, and the world is watching, and it's an opportunity right now to kind of set precedents, because already a lot of people don't trust the institution of policing as a whole in America, and we're watching now the justice system to see if that actually works, because where's the accountability when it comes to that? And it's ironic when the defendant, the lawyer who's defending the police officer is saying that was like 19 years worth of training. So they're training you for that to happen. Like that should be embarrassing to even say that, because it's like, so there's a problem with if he's following protocol, then you're obviously saying there's a huge problem, and you're using that as a defense for a killing. So
that's interesting. So he was essentially the defense attorney was essentially blaming the training for his conduct, blaming the police force's training. And of course, you have to remember that the police force is actually part of this defense system. The police force it pays for, supporting their officers, the police union, for supporting their officers, and like really, I mean, they do everything they can to protect them. Qualified immunity. I mean, we know the list, like putting them on paid leave, not being able to fire officers who murder people. Joshua, I mean, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely worth underscoring that was such a tell when he was like, this is what he was trying to do. I mean, like I don't think he realized what he was saying in that. But I also just first want to say how uplifting it's been to see rallies in most major cities in this country today and yesterday. And so if you need your spirits raised a little bit, it's really worth checking out. There's probably one in your city if you live in a city. But watching the defense has just like made my blood boil. And what you're asking about, the tactic of putting the victim on trial and blaming George Floyd in this case is used so often because it works, and especially blaming Black people for their own suffering is in the muscle memory of this society. It is a default state of being, right? My hope is that, like you were saying, is that the movement for Black lives has sufficiently changed the terrain where it doesn't have the same hold in the public narrative. I haven't seen all of the media in the last day, but I do know that there's at least a strong counter narrative critiquing this in a way that certainly wouldn't have been the case 10 years ago. And so, either way, it's on social movements to create the conditions in society where this stops working, right? And the other thing is that when the defense wasn't focused on blaming George Floyd for his own death, they were claiming Chauvin was like he was distracted because he was a victim, right? People were yelling at him while he had his knee on the neck of a man because they were yelling at him to stop, right? And that was distracting him, right? And despite the fact that this is a guy who has regular complaints of excessive force throughout his entire career for almost 20 years, right? He kept his knee on George Floyd's neck for a full 3 minutes after he stopped breathing, right? And so the flip of, turning the cop into the victim is an amazing set of gymnastics that usually just flies under the radar. But I'm very curious to see, how much traction it's going to have overall now, because the consequence of the movement for Black lives in at least shaping public discourse has been huge in a lot of different ways. But we'll see how the trial unfolds, I guess.
I mean, even just the jury, it's like, how can you have a jury that did not understand what happened? It's such a peculiar trial. I mean, the judge is known to be very fair on this, and he's been pretty vocal actually about what is admissible and what is not. I'm very curious if just how the media portrays it comes up in any way, if it's relevant in any way. I mean, it wouldn't be with the jury, but like, I'm very curious if like that will in some way frame the way, like if how we talk about victims in society of police, of specifically people of color who are victims, that are victims of police force. I'm curious if that framing comes up in the trial at all, and it teaches the jurors to even think like, we are so preconditioned that you just stop for a second. We have the facts of the case, but I want to teach you how to assess these facts. Does that make sense?
And like, haven't we just seen like two mass shootings where the shooters weren't black and they're just being handcuffed and taken to jail? And it's just like, these are people who are shown to be dangerous just a few minutes or a few hours prior, whatever. I didn't follow that closely. This was a violent offense. It had nothing to do with it. How does it warrant like some modern day lynching? You know, it's just, we see the examples. It's so obvious. It's frustrating even to talk about it. That and you're right. We do have to educate people, but it's frustrating that this even has to be done because it's right there in your face. Like there's two justice systems. There's one for blacks and one for, you know, and whatever, and minorities or whatever, and another if you're not. You're able to get away with crimes like that and you get treated well by the police.
You get defended. I mean, the guy that they admitted their crimes, these mass shooters, these white men admitted their crimes openly. For whatever rationale, doesn't even matter what the rationale is. It's still a hate crime against women, a hate crime, whatever your problem is with your sexual, doesn't matter. It's a hate crime against women, hate crime legally against women. Still up for debate about the Asian community, unfortunately legally, but it should be a hate crime. And yet you have an officer, a sheriff who commiserates with the murderer. Okay. Let's move on to Florida. Our favorite governor, DeSantis, has some thoughts about the new vaccine passport recommendations. This vaccine passport, of course, would allow you to go to certain events. All you have to do is show that you've had the vaccine, and you're able to go to events, you're able to get on a plane, you're in public places, you know, public safety during a pandemic. But isn't it interesting that the people didn't like masks because it was infringing on their freedom? Suddenly you're thinking like passports are infringing on their freedom. Let's play this clip.
You want the fox to guard the hen house? I mean, give me a break. I think this is something that has huge privacy implications. It is not necessary to do. You know, we're going to have hit 3.5 million seniors that have gotten shots sometime this week, likely 75% of seniors. It's important to be able to do it. But at the same time, we are not going to have you provide proof of this just to be able to live your life normally. And I'm going to be taking some action in an executive function, emergency function here very shortly.
I just wish that he would use his emergency powers for, you know, really important things like when there's a disaster, you know, funding on the ground, because, you know, they have hurricanes all the time and floodings and tornadoes. Oh, no. This is an emergency, guys. It's an emergency that you don't get a vaccine, not to mention you're forced to take vaccines to go to public schools. Napoleon.
I mean, it's just, that's what they're good at, you know, just preemptively creating an outrage for something that I don't know if it's really implemented yet, if we know what it's going to be implemented for, whatever. It's funny, like for somebody like me who's traveled to Africa many times, right? When I have to go back to the Comoros, I have a vaccination card. What's the difference between calling it a passport or a vaccination card? And I don't think I could have traveled to certain places without it. So de facto it was the same thing. And so he assumes that Floridians won't want to travel overseas where they have their own set of rules and probably were going to demand some sort of proof because, and so it's like, it makes me laugh. Is he not going to go overseas? And he not, I bet you he's going to be the first one getting that passport if they make it mandatory. That's what makes me laugh about the whole thing. The hypocrisy is so great.
Yeah, well, because, you know, it's about freedom. Listen,
but voter IDs, though, that doesn't infringe on your privacy.
Exactly.
But the passports, the vaccine passports do.
That's right. I need to see your genealogy before you vote. I need to see, you know, every single aspect, like how many. I mean, you want to talk about freedom? Let's talk about the unaccompanied minors that are trying to find their family right now. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the detention centers in your state, Ron DeSantis, that I have no doubt someone you know is profiting off of right now. Let's talk about that freedom. Joshua?
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's doing this in bad faith and pandering to the anti-vax crowd who's, threatened the whole health of the world. And obviously countries and institutions need a way to maintain public safety. I also think there's an interesting conversation that we can, it is a tricky conversation where there are a lot of different kinds of proposals globally, and I'm not following all of them. And I think it is, and this is not, to be clear, what DeSantis is saying or doing, but it's useful to be cautious about creating a two-tiered system that excludes people who might not have access to the vaccine, especially in other countries where there is a huge unjust disparity around access between the global south and the global north. There's estimates that much of Africa might not have access to the vaccine until 2023. And so questions about how tracking and monitoring are implemented and who's in control of that are really important discussions to have. And even in this country, even if the initial rollout continues to be so comprehensive that, let's say by midsummer, everyone who wants to have the vaccine can, if the vaccines don't last that long and we need booster shots, right? There's already reports that Pfizer is planning on this summer. Pfizer, not a health body, a pharmaceutical company, will declare the pandemic over and then start charging astronomical prices for the vaccine. And so there is a question about what is the class composition who might have access to different kinds of places in the future. And so I think there's really thoughtful conversations we can have about how do we, what is the architecture of these kinds of systems? And honestly, like the hysteria from the right and from DeSantis is such a distraction from those thoughtful conversations that we could be having. And it makes it about, people's rights to not get vaccinated and all of that kind of garbage. It really gets in the way of us as a society having a thoughtful conversation about actual freedom.
There's we're talking about the apartheid, the vaccine apartheid, but simultaneously, while this is a global issue, just like every other issue, we are being held hostage by a minority of conservatives who are not based in science, who are not based in logic, who are attached to conspiracy theories, and now they have lawmakers and government who are empowering them. And so we're completely beholden to that, so that we can't have these bigger conversations. But even if we weren't beholden to that, we don't have a political system in which we can have those conversations when you have a neoliberal class. Napoleon, I know you wanted to say something. Go for it.
No, I mean, I agree with what Joshua was saying, because there is a nuance to that conversation, but somebody, Josh was talking about it in good faith, and DeSantis is obviously talking about it in bad faith. It's like just different agendas. But I was going to bring that up, whereas, there would be problems, but just DeSantis's argument is just falls totally flat anyways, because it's even if there was, it was infringing in your privacy, I don't think getting a passport is something that would be forced anyways. It would be something somebody would want to get if they want to do certain things or not. But it's a company's conversation.
Like airlines might require vaccine passports, rightfully so, if you're going to do domestic flights in this country, if you're a U.S. citizen, or if you want to travel to the U.S. It's already. Yes, and that's where it plays into the vaccine apartheid, and maybe there are exceptions to those conditions, or who knows? I mean, we don't know. It's we're still new in these conversations, but go ahead, Joshua.
Here's also just the bigger architecture of the conversation is that we're talking about regulations, whether you're talking about regulating business or whether you're talking about regulating access to things or regulating, people's ability to drive and get a driver's license. The right wing has an approach that regulation of any kind is bad. Right. And so that's the approach, like, having any rules in a society are bad, basically. And that means
voter IDs.
Right. Exactly. There's clear moments of hypocrisy, as opposed to saying a regulation, like a rule it depends on the rule. And let's have a conversation about, towards what end are we creating different guidelines, whether we're regulating people to drive or whether we're regulating people to enter a country with an immunization card, or regulating a company to dump pollution in a river. The conversation is about the public good, and it's about what are the institutions that have the power to, like, you need to have a power analysis of the regulation, right? Is this a democratic institution, which a government is supposed to be putting a check on business, or in good faith protecting the public health of its citizenry, or are they, laws in service of oppression and blah, blah, blah. And so to have, if the other side of the conversation is just saying all regulations of any kind are bad, and that's why, and they're, vaccine passports and our freedom, you're not having a conversation. That's not a conversation, Yeah,
I mean, you're basically saying you don't want to take part in a society because you're unwilling to, think deeply. And what's the point of being a lawmaker if you're not going to be able to have a real intentional conversation? On the topic of who are we regulating? What a great transition. You mentioned drivers, Joshua. Our transportation secretary, former McKinsey executive, child of Marxist scholar, the one and only Pete Buttigieg, who speaks 25 languages, sort of. He thinks that the solution to our infrastructure problem and funding the infrastructure is not in the gas tax, which is already problematic. It is in taxing drivers per mile. Wow, what a thought. Let's play that.
Said also that a mileage tax showed, quote, a lot of promise as a way to help pay for the plan. That tax would charge people for how many miles they drive. Is that under consideration?
No, that's not part of the conversation about this infrastructure bill. So just want to make sure that's really clear. But you will be hearing a lot more details in the coming days about how we envision being able to fund this. And again, these are carefully thought through, responsible ideas that ultimately are going to be a win for the economy and need to be compared to the unaffordable cost of the status quo.
Okay, so something of a backtrack on that.
Oopsies. Oopsies, thought it was a great idea last week. Got trolled on Twitter. Oopsie. I mean, this is our future president, guys. This is who it is. I like this. Actually, I can't wait. I can't wait for someone who is this effing inept at reading the room and like reading society and reading inequality to run for president again, because he's going to get dragged. Like, and same thing with, others who have kind of come up to this neoliberal, like, we've appointed you class, because you're not tethered to the people. You don't hear what's happening on the ground. You're not feeling what's happening on the ground. If you have to hustle your way up, if you have to like oust Joe Crowley, if you have to oust the IDC, if you have to actually take on Lacey Clay, and you're part of that progressive force, you have a great sensibility of what is in the ether, what people need, what people are voting on, what people are paying attention to. He thought he could get away with this. And oopsies, he went on Twitter. Sorry, I hate him so much. Napoleon, what do you think?
I mean, it's funny how he said it's going to be a carefully thought through way of funding this. And from the fact that the carefully thought through idea from a day ago is already being like changed. I mean, this guy's like a think tank baby, and he's like, it's like, he's so out of touch. It's just kind of, it's cringy to just watch him squirm and try to get out of his own, like talk, like pablums or whatever he gets on. I mean, it's pretty obvious that the money's dead. You just need to tax the people that, have more money and tax people fairly. And it's obvious that taxing people on the road is a regressive tax that's going to be heavier on lower income people than the others. We all know this. So, you use your creativity. I mean, it's pretty easy to find that solution.
How about we tax the Amazon, like UPS, Amazon, all these freight, whatever it is, the people who are driving down, who are wrecking our roads. How about we tax, there's some, the automobile industry, who, maybe this isn't the best idea, but who are pushing automobiles on people, or, folks who, the developers who are saying, move to the suburbs. Let's just think of all the people who are making it so much more difficult.
And let's add that the infrastructure in America is like 50 years behind, like a lot of other countries. It's like, where's the high-speed railways? How do you get around? Like, just look at New York. Like, it's so clogged. It's like, it needs to be modernized in the first place.
For folks who don't live in New York, I often play the game of what's faster to get to the place I need to go. Taking the subway, which could stall for 30 minutes in the middle of between like right 4 feet before the tracks, or getting in a car and spending $85 to get to my destination, or walking across a bridge for an hour and a half. Joshua, you had some traffic yesterday, right? You hit some traffic?
Yeah, just a little bit, but it was, and I mean, we were talking about this yesterday about how in the Bay Area, we didn't used to have that much traffic until the advent of Uber and Lyft. And then also with the tech companies moving in, this wave of gentrification in the Bay Area meant that a lot of the folks coming in are people who have personal cars, whereas most of the folks before we used to, everybody took public transportation. And like, even that basic idea of like, you would think that any Democrat in this political environment becoming transportation secretary would have a couple baseline like lenses that they use to view things. And one is like, oh, public transportation is the thing that we want to incentivize and encourage. And the way to fund things, like Napoleon was saying, is through progressive taxation, not regressive taxation. And the fact that he doesn't even have those two basic lenses of focusing on individual car drivers, when still all of our infrastructure in the society is set up to incentivize people sitting in personal cars, which is not efficient or accessible or affordable in at least on the coast and in the cities. And if you're trying to go cross country, I know that in lots of, it's not like that everywhere, but it's just wild. I just don't even understand. Sometimes you can look at a politician and understand where they got these, a certain idea. And with Buttigieg consistently, I'm just like, it's just like, huh? Like, are you an alien stuffed into a human's body? Like trying to figure out how, it's like he learned how to be human in a like from a textbook or something. Exactly. I just don't get where these ideas come from.
It's like, McKinsey taught me this. And what really like infuriates me even more is like transportation Joe Biden, Mr. Amtrak, which to be fair, he has committed to high speed railroads and funding the trains across America. But, aside from that, like one of the conversations about the train system is we want high speed rails, but the railroads have not been upgraded to handle the high speed rails. So if you remember a few years ago, there was that huge, oh my goodness, I had friends that were on the train. The Acela from New York to DC went off because it was speeding, but not at a rate that was, everyone's like, that's fast. It was like 75 miles per hour instead of, don't quote me on this, whatever the speed limit was, because it took a turn and the railway couldn't handle it. So the amount of infrastructure repair we need, because you're sharing these railways with the freight trains, which are heavier, it's just a joke. It's like,
well, this is why we need a Green New Deal. I mean, this is why like having a framework to understand rebuilding our infrastructure in a way that is both giving, revitalizing the economy by giving meaningful working class jobs that are union, that actually bring us towards a post-carbon future that doesn't rely on poisoning low-income communities and communities of color in order to extract energy, whether that's to power our vehicles or whether that's to power our homes. I mean, it's all there, there is a plan. It's called the Green New Deal.
I mean, the other way of saying it, if like folks who take money from energy companies and oil and gas, maybe the other way of saying it is, how about we just create a new infrastructure and make it greener? Like, I know it sounds silly, and union jobs, but like maybe it should just be called like union infrastructure deal. By the way, it's green and it eliminates like oil and gas. We take the money from the oil and gas companies, but that's just like hidden in maybe it's just a rebranding. I don't know. All right,
I got to change the name because Green New Deal scares too many people, apparently.
Apparently, yeah. It should just be called, you get a job, you get a job, you get a job, and faster trains. Hire me.
Perfect. Yeah.
I'm available.
This is your new, comms consultant for the naming of bills.
Everybody wins deal. Like the environment, the people, you save time, et cetera, et cetera.
When I ran for office, we had to come up, it was a special election and it was a nonpartisan special election. You have to come up with your own party name. And so, there's all these rules about it. And I was like, everyone loves Pizza Party.
This is a little bit of an aside, but as some folks know, part of my work for many years is I train activists in organizing, and often we'll do when we're in trainings activities that elicit power dynamics. And one of the favorite things is like if you divide the room into two groups, and the first task is to pick a name for your group. immediately all the power dynamics emerge if you give them like 30 seconds to pick a name. And in it, it's just so interesting to debrief like how they decide a name, what they decide it based on, like who gets to speak, who doesn't get to speak, how and it's like, okay, now let's talk about how you're making decisions when you're building strategy. How are these same like dynamics? And it's something as simple as like pick a name, because people get so invested in having the right name for a thing, much more so than like it is the substance of it any good.
No, it's true. I mean, even with our show, people say, "Oh, how creative, the Nomiki show." And I said, you know, I was advised that if you want people to know what the show is, put your name in it. You know what? Yeah.
Michael was saying the same thing with the Michael Brooks show.
That's it. It's a brand. I mean, if you want to carry on the show to somebody else, you can always rebrand later. It's YouTube. It's not like it's MSNBC or something. I want to shift gears if you guys have a little bit more time, because I do want to talk about the Biden administration. This is a topic that's really heavy on my mind right now because I spent 2 hours on my student loans this morning. And I'm furious at Senator Schumer. The Biden administration is expanding a pause on federal student loan interest. Oh, thank you. Thank you for pausing my 4.5% interest. How about you maybe, I don't know, pause, eliminate student loans? That's a video, right? Let's play that video.
We will be expanding the pause on student loan interest and collections to the more than 1 million borrowers who are in default on a loan that was made by a private lender in the old bank-based loan program known as the Federal Family Education Loan Program. The step particularly protects 800,000 borrowers who are at risk of having their tax refunds seized. That's actually a pretty significant steps. The president continues to call on Congress to cancel $10,000 in debt for student loan borrowers. That's something Congress could take an action on, and he'd be happy to sign. We're still taking a closer look at our options.
Okay, let's just break this down simply. Oh my God. So Congress, you do your job, or I could sign an executive order and just eliminate it all easily with the pen strike. And Senator Schumer's like, oh, you do your job. And then Elizabeth Warren's like, yeah, Schumer, go do your job. And meanwhile, Joe Manchin's like, I'm not doing anything. And Schumer's like, I can't do anything because Joe Manchin's saying I can't do anything. Would you guys pick up the Power Broker and read it for 2 weekends? Just read it and remember what LBJ did. He was sitting on the shitter, literally calling people and screaming in the other room, do your job or I'm going to force you to do it and go to Congress and embarrass the shit out of you. That's what I want in my leaders right now, because I just looked at my student loans this morning and I am done, guys. I'm done. Napoleon.
I mean, he would look like a superhero if he would cancel it. That's what they want to do, like cancel it and do those slow motion videos where you're walking out the White House, another day at the office. People will love you, but it takes spine, and they just want to pass the buck. And in the meantime, they're going to give people a little bit of crumbs here and there, and expect us to be like, oh, thank you so much. It's like, get out of here, man. Just
Master.
take action.
Thank you,
Take
Master.
action. Be a leader.
When you were doing that impression, Nomi, I thought of, that meme of all the different Spider-Mans pointing at each other. It's like that. And the excuse making is just, and the thing is that, when they do give people crumbs, the Democrats are committed to giving crumbs that are just the most technical, weird things that they'll never get credit for. And people won't even understand that they got the benefit in the first place. And so it's like, you're not even building the case that government can actually do something good for people, which is also the bigger picture of being able to offer leadership in that way, improve people's lives, and then take credit for it is also making the broader ideological case that that democratic governance can actually can improve things, right? It's like they're committed to, even when they're trying to improve things, do it in ways that no one will notice or know about in real life, other than whatever.
I don't know what you're talking about, Joshua. I think it's a really clever bill to sign called temporarily eliminate student loan interest debt. Yeah.
and perhaps don't get your tax refund blocked or something like that she added after. It's just so crazy. But let me understand, is this a donor thing? Why doesn't he just stop the debt? Is there somebody pressuring him not to do it?
No, this is the crazy thing about it. They have the authority and the money to do this. And what I really don't understand structurally and in terms of power and donors is why they don't, because it frees up money for people to pay their credit card debt, which is kind of his owner, or like, you know, their mortgages or their rent. I mean, there's so many other industries who would be so excited if people didn't have to pay their student loans first because they can't get out of it, instead of their rent, their mortgages, their car loans, their credit card bills. I mean, all of these industries are like drooling, waiting for the minute that people don't have to pay their student loans, which federal student loans, we have the ability to do so in a sign. I don't get it. I really don't get it.
I was like, the question is, do you hate us, Joe Biden? Do you hate us?
Ooh, there you go. Do you hate us, Bill? I would like to propose a bill in Congress called "Does Joe Biden hate us?" Or whose fault is it? Joe Biden, Joe Manchin, or Chuck Schumer's? No? All right, Napoleon to Legend, Joshua Kahn Russell. Love you guys. Thank you for joining us this Tuesday. We will see you soon. I don't want to tell everybody just yet, but we'll see you soon. Ish. And to everybody else, thank you guys for joining us today, this lovely Tuesday, March 30th. We're going to have an interesting week. I'm going to be doing a lot of pre-tapes. You're going to see some interesting interviews next week. What do we have? Some shout outs? I know that Harvey K is in the chat. Yeah, we know this. Harvey K is in the chat on Twitch, on YouTube. As always, thank you, Harvey K, Professor Harvey K. Go check out his interview with Chris Smalls on Issa Small World on YouTube. Shout out to This Is Revolution podcast for dropping by the YouTube live chat today. Thank you. You can check out This Is Revolution pod right here on YouTube for those on YouTube. And big shout out to Kitty Kyler subscribing at tier 1 and for gifting the channel a tier 1 subscription. That's very kind of you. Kyler Asado sends his love. I am writing a policy platform for my candidate right now, but it's hard to concentrate with the fire comments from the guests in Nomiki. I guess I'm fiery today. Prairie Fire Kowalski from Nebraska. Tax the rich, don't milk dry cows. Pete B, they kick. Pete Buttigieg. Agreed. All right. Who else do we have here? Oh, yeah, our algorithms. Thank you, MIDI-Docs and Mario, for working those algorithms. And of course, over at YouTube, our moderators, Bob C, Choking the Orb, and Chuck Diesel. And over on Twitch, Dorian Sapiens, A Difficult Truth, Nug Wrangler, Armeens, and Nightbot. Thank you for keeping those chat rooms troll-free. To everybody else, thanks for watching, for listening. Go join us on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. The patrons are what keep us going. Seriously, we know it's difficult right now. So if you can't afford it, please reach out to us. We're happy to work something out. And if you are a patron and you're having difficulty, we totally understand. We can work with you too as well. So join us over at patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. And if you're on YouTube, or if you're not, go to YouTube later and like the video right now. Last chance. This is the moment. Work those algorithms. We will see you tomorrow. Stay in solidarity. Oh, and go Amazon workers.